Hi everyone. This is a short video that I'm going to make just in response to last week's work, week 2 of term 2. And this video is going to be about just kind of giving a little bit of extra help to people who may have struggled with the work that we left for our body paragraphs for Women of Troy. In week 1 of term 2, we sent out a survey asking which part of your English work you were having most trouble with, and the part that was most popular in terms of what was difficult was body paragraphs that you can see here in the yellow. So about just over 50% of students were saying that body paragraphs were the bit that they were having trouble with. So we decided that week 2 we'll be running our content on body paragraph writing. So I'll just sort of talk through the PowerPoint a little bit in a bit more detail, and maybe give a little extra guidance for anyone who was who went through it themselves and just found themselves a bit confused. So looking at the first slide here, we've got I'll move my little webcam up to here. We've got what is basically the 4 kind of standard paragraphs that we want you to try and put into any essay that you write about Women of Troy. So no matter what prompt you get, you're basically always going to be able to write an essay that includes these 4 kind of standard paragraphs. So the first paragraph that you write will always be about the gods in the play and how their behavior is very capricious, like they change their mind very often, and when they change their mind, bad things tend to happen. The second paragraph that we want you to write is about the way that the women of the play, the main characters, about the way that they interact with each other, the things that they say to each other, and the kind of the grief that they undergo, and how that contributes to the overall message of the play. The third paragraph that you'll be writing is about the men of the play. So this is someone like Talthybius, the messenger, or Menelaus, the Greek general. But there are also, you can also make mention of Agamemnon, who actually doesn't appear in the script of the play, but is nevertheless a very important character. And finally, the fourth body paragraph is all about the kind of way that Euripides wrote this play, the style in which he wrote it, so the stylistic elements of the play. He wrote this play in quite a unique way. It doesn't really follow a standard narrative structure. It doesn't really follow a standard theatre structure either. And it makes it quite a unique play, and it makes the message of the play quite a bit more powerful. Its anti-war message gets quite a bit more powerful because of these sort of unique elements that Euripides has included in the play. So looking onto the next slide, yeah, we're sort of saying, why do we want you to write these 4 body paragraphs for each essay? We want you to write these 4 because they're very broad. They cover a lot of different information, and they'll enable you to show to an examiner that you have a lot of knowledge of the play. And even if that means that when push comes to shove in the exam or in the SAC, if you're just thinking of a sample essay that you might have read that contained these 4 paragraphs and you're kind of regurgitating that from your brain, it's still going to look like you have a lot of knowledge of the play if you copy, or not copy, but if you sort of use this 4 body paragraph structure. And so we're thinking about how we actually go about writing one. So there's 2 sort of key components to writing a good body paragraph. One, it's got to have a good structure, and this is just teal. It's the same thing that you've been getting hammered into you for the last 5 years of high school, teal paragraph structure. And it's also got to contain lots of good content from the play. So that's your knowledge of quotes, your knowledge of the story, your knowledge of the characters, your knowledge of the context. So let's look at structure. As I said, it's teal. Your body paragraphs have got to have a topic sentence. They've got to use evidence. They've got to include explanation of how this evidence supports your overall argument. And you've got to have a linking sentence that sort of wraps the paragraph up at the end. I think this is probably not new information to anyone, and you would have done very similar things with your Medea essays last year. there's a bit more in-depth information on each of these four elements with some examples in the following slides. So I'll just have a look at some of these examples with you. So for the topic sentence, it's got to have a clear and distinct idea or argument. So if you've got a prompt that's about something like, if the prompt is something like, what comment does Euripides make on the nature of war? Then your topic sentences would always want to link back to that overall prompt. So you want to have your topic sentences always relate to the nature of war. Or if we look at this example here, Euripides highlights that the fate of the Greeks and Trojans alike is at the mercy of the fickle and capricious gods. So that's a topic sentence that we know is going to go into at the start of your gods paragraph, which is the first body paragraph. It's about the capricious gods, and this is a topic sentence that I think would probably be used in an essay that's asking you to discuss the women's fate in the play. So a prompt like that could be something like, by the end of the play, Hecuba's fate is sealed. Do you agree? And so one of your topic sentences could be this example that you've got here. Looking at the evidence, this is the one where you've got to have a good knowledge of quotes from the play, and you've got to have a good knowledge of the overall story of the play. If that is something that's causing you grief, then I urge you to read and use the Women of Troy booklet. It is chock-a-block with quotes, and one of the very first pages of that booklet is a short summary of the plot of the play. It goes for about a page and it covers all the main points. I think beyond that, I would say use any website that you need to. Use SparkNotes, use LitCharts, search for Women of Troy, search for plot summary, and read those plot summaries, and just make sure that you've got a good working understanding of the overall plot of the play. There's not very many significant things that happen in this play, but it's important to understand what they are and when they occur. If we go down to explanation, that's when you're talking about why you've chosen the evidence that you've chosen. So if you've chosen a specific quote, why have you chosen it? And after you include that evidence, the way you explain it is by using sentence starters that look kind of like this. So if you're using evidence about Hecuba always falling to the ground, for example, which we know happens a lot in this play, you could include a quotation about that, and then you could start your next sentence by saying something like, thus Euripides suggests that war is an act which causes continuous suffering as symbolized through Hecuba's consistent falling to the ground. And then when we move on to the link sentence, it's basically a moment to summarize the content of your body paragraph and link it back to your overall contention. And so that's going to depend on the prompt that you're writing about. So is it going to be a fate essay? Is it a blame essay? Is it a nature of war essay? You'll be linking back to your overall argument, your overall contention about what the play is saying. Okay, so there's a few extra resources there, some really useful structural words that you can use. What I want to do now is to look at the content that can go into your body paragraph, because this is kind of like the meat of the paragraph, and this is the bit that that students kind of find a bit difficult because their knowledge of the play sometimes it can be a bit tricky because this play is very contextually odd compared to other stories that you might be familiar with. So your knowledge of the play consists of the plot, the characters, the context, the themes, and the symbols. And I've just given you some links there to help you find that content if you're struggling to find it in the text. Because I know that sometimes reading the text itself is a bit mystifying because the language is kind of old and the way that it's laid out as a play script is a bit foreign. So I can recommend these websites here to help you understand the play a bit better. VCE study guides, Lisa's study guides. Look, use it if you want. We're never going to give you detention for using another source, but lots of kids got in a bit of strife last year, not from our school, but lots of kids across the state used and copied essays from Lisa's study guides, and they were found out. And it was a big thing that was mentioned to us teachers in the report from the English assessors that we attended at the start of this year. So don't copy essays from Lisa's study guides. Inside the Women of Troy booklet, which of course is available to download from Compass, there are heaps of sample paragraphs. They appear beneath the quote tables, and they appear in the sample essays that are at the end of the document. And what I'm doing here with these next slides is we're just looking at some of the ideas that you can include in each of your body paragraphs. So remember, those body paragraphs, one is about the gods, one is about the women, one is about the men, and one is about the sort of the theatrical style that Euripides has used, the stylistic elements. So here in this first paragraph, we're talking about the gods. What I've put here is a lot of different dot points on different moments in the play that can be used in an essay, because these moments all relate to something to do with the gods and how they affect the events of the play. So, for example, if you get a prompt that's asking you to describe what role do you believe the gods played in the destruction of Troy, that is just begging for you to write a nice big paragraph about how the gods are very much in charge of the women's fates, but they're also very self-interested. They're very capricious. So you can find a lot of those moments from the play in this particular slide. Same goes for the next slide when we're talking about the women of the play. The big moments that the women have, they spend a lot of time talking to each other, being miserable, justifiably, arguing sometimes. But they also have these moments where they talk about how sad they are that their social position has collapsed, how sad they are that the line of men of Troy is ended when they're bearing Astyanax especially. And I've just included some of those moments here in this slide as well. Same for a body paragraph about men. The main moments of the play that involve men, usually men behaving horribly, appears on this slide. And the theatrical conventions that Euripides kind of manipulates are sort of summarized here on this slide as well. So I think what would be a really good exercise for you to do is to read through the content of these 4 slides, the kind of the information that you can put into these body paragraphs. And then I think what would be a good thing to do is for you to read the 3 stock essays that appear in the document on Compass Resources. So if I just look here from that lesson plan from week 2, this file here that I'm downloading now, the stock essays, there are 3 very similar essays, very similar, but they can be used to answer a variety of prompts. So I've just put it here on the screen. So if we've got a stock essay about blame, so any prompt that you might get about blame. So for example prompt, let's do a really simple one. Who is to blame for the destruction of Troy? Like, super simple prompt. It's just asking you to answer a question. I mean, it's a complex answer, but a very simple prompt. So you're going to say, well, we can blame the gods. They were very capricious. We can blame the women. We can blame the men. And combining all of this, the fact that we're exploring blame in this particular way, the way that Euripides has done this, he's making this very sort of grand comment on how trying to blame someone for the destruction of war, it might make you feel good in the short term, but it won't make you feel any better in the long term. And then you should probably read these example paragraphs that we've got in these stock essays to see how I've used some of the information that I've put here in this PowerPoint slideshow in these stock essays. And that leads into your task number 1, which is to read through carefully all of the stock essays attached to the lesson plan, and then just to highlight any parts of the essays that are different from each other. And you'll probably find that the essays are quite similar indeed. So I'll pause the video here. I'll make another one for the remaining tasks, and I will put that up on Teams as well. Thank you for your attention.